Here we are, another fantastic Wednesday night.
Right?
Yeah, me and Professor P are in here, so now you know it's literally Wednesday if you just drug your day to, or you drug your butt to work and then drooled throughout the day.
If it was
Now
a
you know
blur,
it's Wednesday
it's
night.
Wednesday.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me run through and greet everyone. So we got LP 94 Lars, John Wilburn, Fab Race Mon Repeat out of Northeast Dragway, Bear Rose Garage. Let's see, One Eyed Cat, Clint Street Machines, Michael Schmidt, Slant Daily Garage,
What's up, suckers?
man, Clayton's Toolbox, Dust Devil Garage, Levi's Backyard Performance, Blue Grit Garage. Let's see, Mama M Cubed, which is, I think that's Mopar's Mustang's minivan. So calling Tebow.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right, huh?
Miss Cat G, Bruce Keltgen, and I think that's it. So we run through the list. And Colleen's already scolding everybody. Hit that, smash that like button, right? So, yeah, or hammer that like button. But tonight we have a topic of discussion. I don't know if you noticed the thumbnail where Shane and I were posing as a couple of dudes from Mythbusters.
Mythbusters.
Yeah, dude, you got to see that thumbnail because you came out really good and mine was terrible.
Dude, I was actually looking at it. It's beautiful.
It's great, right?
It's pretty good.
Yeah, but we're going to throw a couple of topics of discussion out here tonight that I think is going to work pretty good for Wednesday night tech talk, because we're going to bring up some stuff that is either common misconceptions or misunderstandings, or not necessarily understanding and just pushing the I believe button and just moving on. And what we're going to do is hopefully be able to straighten some of that out and bring to light how these things actually work. The first topic of discussion that Mr. Wilburn has been jumping up and down about all day long is conducting a compression test and what it's actually showing you. Yeah. And the differences between a compression test, a static compression ratio, and a dynamic compression ratio, and then how oil affects it while it's running and while it's essentially a static compression test.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors in that. And the common misconception is I'm just going to read it and the numbers really mean nothing. And I'm looking for a percentage difference across the board to identify something that's causing issues with my compression. And, you know, that's the norm. That's what it's generally done for, is to identify a cylinder that doesn't have effective compression ratio on the individual cylinder and what it is. And what is causing it. Yeah.
What is causing it? Because with oil, you can figure that out. Usually.
Yep. But so that's where we're going to get started is you're conducting a compression test.
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, for those of you that have never done a compression test is actually you're reading the compression ratio of the cylinder in pounds per square inch, right?
Yeah, the pumping of the cylinder, the actual pumping of it with the
right. How well, not so much the efficiency. It's more or less the capability of the cylinder.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, what it can
so the biggest misconception of this is if you're using like an automotive V8 engine, don't use the push-in compression testers. One, they don't seal worth a crap.
They don't. Even if you put grease around them, you're going to blow them off.
Yeah, and those are made for small engines or dirt bikes or something, just to give you an idea of what's going on.
Imagine it's like a set of calipers compared to like a set of micrometers. It's a quick check just to see, okay, I got compression, and move on. Don't use it as a number. It's just to say, I have compression. Perfect. Let's move on.
Well, and see, in that where when you're looking at basic diagnostics of an engine, the first things there's only four major things that take it to run. Okay, four major: fuel, air, spark, and then compression. Okay, those are your four major things.
Suck, squeeze, bang, blow.
Right, suck, squeeze, bang, blow. That's what I was taught as well. When I had to think, I had to correlate it in my head. So.
Right.
But yeah, those things are the main things that you're looking for. Your bang is essentially your compression. If you don't have compression, let's say you're going down the road and the engine just shuts off. Chances of you losing compression is almost nil, right? Well, you'd have to lose it on multiple cylinders for the thing not to run.
Yeah, and you got to think about what's actually taking place here. It's not just the fuel itself is not flammable. The vapor is flammable. So what you're doing is you're taking fuel that's atomized, compressing it from a space that's this big to a space that's this big, and you're essentially making a bomb. And then you're igniting that bomb and then having it explode the piston down. That's essentially what you're doing. So if there's not enough compression, then there's not enough squeeze. Just like with any type of bomb, the higher compression you put it into, and much force it takes to exert it and go out, that's how much bang you get. That's your compression, essentially. It's that simple. It's really a simple deal.
Well, and so Danny Boyd's saying the timing chain. Yes, the timing chain, it is something that will affect compression because you'll lose your air, fuel, and compression all at one time generally. But most of the time, when the engine just shuts off, it's not generally a timing chain related issue. It's most of the time it's either fuel or a spark issue.
Yeah. And someone did put in here too a leak down test, but we'll get to the leak down test later. Right now, we're just talking about actually running a compression test to figure out if it's up or bottom. This is, once again, it's just a quick check, and then you use the leak down test to do your finite test, see how much percentage of leak down you have.
Yeah, and so and this one came from one of our viewers. As a matter of fact, Mr. Wilburn was hammering me about it today. That there was one of our fellow YouTubers that's this, somewhat semi within our community, was doing a leak down, or was doing a compression test and was like totally gooning this up.
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, well, you know what we'll do? We will discuss what the compression test is and then how it actually functions and what you're doing it for. Okay. So first things first, generally when you want to do a compression test, there's main factors that you got to take into account. The engine's being spun over by the starter most of the time.
Yes.
Okay. So what you'll want to do is put a battery charger or tender on your battery before you even start. So that way it's always at the same value when you spin the engine over, because it will go down, the more that you do.
Yeah.
So
take all the spark plugs out.
Take all the plugs out.
And
the other thing is
throttle.
Open the throttle and the choke.
Yes.
Okay. So you want the choke wide open. You want the throttle wide open. That way it can pull in all the air that it actually needs to fill the cylinder to give you a correct value without hindering the airflow, right? Because let's face it, if you're spinning the engine over and it's got the choke flap closed, it is restricting the air coming in.
Yep.
So you're definitely not going to get a test that's value added.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, too, I don't like the engine to be dead cold. It's just my personal opinion. I want it at least not hot, but just
it should have some heat in it so that
a
it's
little
like
heat,
operating condition.
Just something so that way things are expanding, so you can get closer to like actual operating temperature of the actual compression when it's running, or closer to, about 100 degrees or over usually.
Right. But you don't have to do that. I mean, especially if it stopped running and you're like, oh, I'm assuming that something's wrong with one of these cylinders. It's down on one of the cylinders. Okay, cool. Well, or multiple cylinders. Let's go ahead and start our test. But you should want the engine with some type of warmth in it, and it has been recently lubricated. Not something that's been sitting for 25 years, and then you just try to do a compression test on it. Not an ideal situation. Excuse me. All right. So the other things, now you get your spark plugs pulled, you got the choke flap open, you got the carburetor wide open, and you got your battery tender on there or charger to top the battery all the way up so that it's spinning over at pretty much the same RPM every time. The next thing you're going to need is a screw-in compression tester, one that threads into your plug threads.
With an O-ring.
Yep. And you want it to have an O-ring on the base, like it's past the threads, so it seals up against the block itself or the cylinder head itself.
And a little tip, put a little grease on it too, so that way when when you screw it down, it doesn't get stuck, and it puts a little extra seal on there too.
And then when you do it, what you want to do is you want to have generally the smartest thing to have is a underhood button where you can bump it over by hand, right? There's that stupid thumbs up thing.
There you go. Okay. Look at that.
Yeah, how awesome is that, right? Okay, good. So you want to have your thumbs up button, right? Or your thumbs up, your underhood crank over button, so that you can spin the engine over from under the hood. So that way you're not having to go from one place to the next to the next to the next. It's you're just to spin it over underneath the hood. and then hold your compression tester. When you spin the engine over, you're wanting to watch the compression tester. It should move up. It doesn't matter how far it moves up as long as it's consistently moving up. But it'll get to a point where it crests and it stays there. That's your actual compression number. And good compression testers will have a bleed off valve where it'll hold all that pressure till it's maxed out. And then after you've taken your reading, you can push the button. Okay. So don't forget to push the button because it can screw up your readings on all the other cylinders too. Oh man, every single one of them is dead on. Well, that's because you didn't release the compression from the first one.
Also, another one too is how many times does it actually have to pump before it gets to max? So, like if it's like sometimes 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 4, right in that range, it should be close to max, and then it should just be negligible within, like, say 2 or 3 pounds, which is you're never going to notice that. But if it gets up, like let's just say your reading is say 170, and it gets there within 4, but then if you keep going and it's pumping, it gets to 172. 170 is your number. Just remember that.
Yeah, and you should do it. What you want to do is you want to spin it over and do it the same for each individual cylinder.
That's what I was just about to get to. Exactly the same thing. That we can kind of keep track, and that way. And then also too, if it's pumping but constantly moving up, but it takes 10 pumps to get to, like, say 3 under 170, so 167, you know that you got something going on in that hole somewhere.
Yeah, and what you are looking for is the variation. The number that you're looking for was that I've always been taught is 10%. Okay, so that means if you're getting 170, you should have essentially 1.7 psi difference between each cylinder would be acceptable. So if it gets more than that, then, or no, it's 17, right? 17. I'm sorry, 10%. So, but yeah, math in public, dude. Yeah, but 17 psi within the number that you had originally assessed is your acceptable number. Anything outside of that, you need to start looking at what the possibility it is.
Yes.
Okay. So let's say you checked all 8 cylinders. They're dry. You didn't do anything with them except for pull the plug, screw in there or the compression tester, spin it over. You've done everything as according to the plan, and you come up with essentially one cylinder that is below that 17. Let's say it's like 25 psi difference. Okay. Now the next step is to go, okay, well, I got one bad cylinder. First thing I need to do is
put a little oil down.
Not yet. I don't do that yet. Well, I don't know. Maybe it may make sense, but what I always do is make sure you pull the valve cover off of that side and look at the rocker arms. If your rocker arms are, let's say you got tons of lash in it. If you got a solid lifter cam, it's got tons of lash in it. It can severely affect this thing.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah, I do. So like if I have a customer's car that would come over and I was doing like an initial assessment on it, I would pull the plugs out, look at the plugs, and I would do a quick compression test. For me personally, what I would do, so I found one that was low, I took some ATF and I would squirt it into that hole and then do another test on it real quick before I took valve covers off or anything, because then that would tell me if it was the rings are going away or what kind of condition, the cylinder, the pistons, or the rings. There's something out of those 3 that's having an issue, and the oil will seal it up. The ATF, because it's thin enough to get past those rings and seal it up, and if the compression comes back up, then it's the rings. If it doesn't, it's going to be usually the valves.
Yeah, it's in the top end.
Or valves of some sort. Not saying the valves are leaking. Like Dal said, it could be valve adjustment. There could be many different factors happening there.
I always do the valve adjustment thing. But the reason why I do that is because that can throw you off. Even though it's operating, it's not spinning like it normally would. So you won't hear it ticking. You won't hear it clatter. Nothing like that. It's just a quick deal. Because if let's say all right, we just go and put some oil in. All right, you just put the oil in. The number doesn't change. You're going to assume it's in the valves anyway, right?
Yep.
So you're going to end up having to take that valve cover off. Generally, it's not a ring issue most of the time. What you'll find is generally in the top end, but that's not always the case. You can have a broken ring, or you can have a broken ring gland, or you could have a burned piston.
Yeah, and a broken ring gland an oil will close that up. If you say you spray a little nitrous, you break the top off, you put a little ATF in there. I've actually seen that hide a problem before.
Well, and we should discuss this for a little bit because, okay, adding oil, what it does is it fills in the crevices around the rings. It helps them properly seal. Actually, it better than helps them properly seal because when they're running, they don't even get that much oil. When you put oil in the cylinder, you're putting excess amounts of what the cylinder normally that cylinder wall would normally get.
Yeah, hundreds of times more oil than what it sees because normally it barely even sees a film because of the scraper. The second ring usually takes all that off, anyways.
Right. And then the oil can technically mask an issue with ring seal. It could be the ring, it could be the cylinder wall, it could be almost anything, right?
Taper, it could be anything. Yeah.
It could be taper. And then, what I have noticed is, okay, a lot of garage YouTube channels, they'll look at the cylinder block and it's scored really bad. Oh, we got to take it to have it bored. Okay, well, you don't necessarily have to have that board. An engine will literally run with a score in it. Probably, gosh, I bet you could probably get away with something almost like 10% of the size of the piston.
I've had it scored pretty bad on the thrust side. I had a car that had been sitting for a while, and the pin was, because it wasn't a floating pin, it was a press pin, and so it was kind of rigid. I could barely move it, but I didn't find out until later. It was so hard to move that it was literally creating a divot into the cylinder wall. But I didn't know that because I did a cranking compression on it. Only had 2 pounds less than the rest of the engine. And it ran just fine. Every once in a while it would smoke here and there, but then it would just go away when it got warm. Until I took it apart, this was actually on a Slant 6. Until I took it apart, I didn't know that was how bad it was, and it ran just fine. I was thinking about just putting a dingle ball hone on it, calling it good.
I mean, the one that always gets me is like I kind of waver on is when they get the rust pitting in the cylinder, and it's like these deep crevice pits, right? And I remember my old man used to tell me, he said, your engine will never notice that, right? He said, the first time that the piston goes up and down, it's going to put oil in there, and then the flame front's going to come across it, and it's going to become carbon. And then it's going to happen a couple 100,000 times over a short period of time, and it'll just fill that crevice in with carbon. And it will never notice them little divots in there.
That's right.
But there is some that I had like really wavered on because I was afraid they were going to break the rings. They're that bad. But most of the time, what you'll find is an engine will almost run like on the verge of blowing up. I mean, like literally on the verge. And some of them like will still run while blowing up.
Yeah. And after they've blown up, you let them cool back down, they'll start back up again.
Even with holes in the block. If you've never seen the hole in the block repairs, you can get a few more miles out of her that way.
I did it from Sunrise Highway all the way back to San Diego.
Yeah.
And John's right here. A teaspoon of oil dumped in the cylinder head into the cylinder, will make an engine that doesn't even need rings installed past a crank compression test, but it still won't run. He's absolutely correct. And that's why, you do the crank compression test. If it's low, then put the oil in and just see how much it raises it. So yes, he is absolutely correct.
Okay. So, back to our test.
Sure.
We put oil in there. The problem didn't go away. It still persisted. So now it's in the top end. So the best thing to do at that point, you can pull your valve cover off, check your lash adjustment. Chevrolets used to be notorious in the early 80s for eating the cam lobes. And this used to be one of the ways to tell was it would have like either stupid high cranking compression compared to all the rest of them, or it would have essentially like nothing, right? It would be down 40, 50 PSI on one cylinder. And that's because either the exhaust valve wasn't opening, right? Or the intake valve was barely opening.
Yeah. And that's one thing I noticed. If you have one cylinder that's extremely high, you usually have a valve train issue in that one because it's not allowing it. There's no overlap on it or anything. It's not seeing the same dynamics as the rest.
Right. So, and in John's case here, yes, you could get it to pass with just oil in the cylinder because the oil in the cylinder, like we said, is 100 times more than you would normally see in the cylinder. And it masks a lot of it because the oil itself will become the sealing property. Okay. Yeah. But the first time you lean on it with like anything like gasoline in the cylinder, the oil is blown back down to the crankcase and you have nothing. So let's see. Michael Schmidt says, got a very low 20-ish pound cylinder with valve D's like blow by. I honestly think the rings are stuck because I felt power temp come back for a block or two of driving. Got to fix without removing the head. Okay, well, this is what some of the, you got your what do we
That's where the
call them?
leak down test.
Sorcerers.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
The
call
sorcerers,
this.
right? Or the wizardry,
Yeah, the
right?
wizardry and the sorcerers. This is where those guys come in. Okay.
Yes.
This is the kind of stuff that Berryman's was made for. This is the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that Marvel Mystery Oil is supposed to repair.
It doesn't.
Yeah, the best thing I've seen for this, okay, is ATF. ATF works really, really good at removing carbon around the rings. It's not Marvel Mystery Oil. It does not burn easy. What you got to do is you virtually got to choke it down the throat of the carburetor. So you climb right over it, hold the throttle open, and then just pour in your ATF. Let it plume out a black, well, it won't be black. It'd be white smoke plume until it's all done. But generally, when you're done, you can go back and look at the tailpipe, and there will be freaking chunks of carbon on the ground.
Yeah, or distilled water.
You can use distilled water will steam clean the cylinder.
Yeah,
not so much the rings make them unstick, but
no.
The ATF you have a better luck of using the ATF. But Marvel Mystery Oil and Berryman's, they both have a pretty good reputation. There's a reason they've been around for 100 years. They will fix stuck rings from sitting. Otherwise, if you have something that comes and goes, I would probably say that's probably more a broken ring than it is a stuck ring. Just because the broken ring, what's happening is it's move around in there and it'll fill in the gap. And then the next time it won't fill in the gap, and the next time it will. And so it'll be down on power until it, like finished, or it closes up that gap somewhat again.
You know what's funny is that he made a reference here that anyone in the chat might catch, but some of the young folks might not. Valdez like blow by. Valdez. That's a term from when I was a kid. That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
If you like Alaskan shorelines and you think they're beautiful, go back to like 1989 and look at them.
Yeah, look at the Exxon Valdez.
Yeah. SSR Performance says most combustion is done at 25% of bore anyway. Right at the top.
Yeah.
The big one that John and I were talking about, like not too just today, matter of fact, was that Vizard told him that the higher the compression that you have, the faster that the compression decays after the explosion.
Absolutely.
Which is actually pretty neat because it would essentially have an exponential effect of how much it loses until it gets down to what it normally would be like an 8-to-1 compression engine.
And that's the reason why when you run a big cam, you still keep the powers, because the pressure and the cylinders drop so rapidly when those valves those timing events of the cam are open. There's a lot of time where that thing's open and closing, and there's very small where it's actually compressed. And that's the reason why. It's because when that thing explodes, it decays so fast and so rapidly, and then the pressure wave goes out. Yes.
Levi says, of course, GM is the cam eating king. LOL. Small blocks, old small blocks and big blocks. Now that is now with LSDOD stuff. Well, no, it's always been the king of, and don't say GM, it's Chevrolet. Yeah. Chevrolet used to eat the cams more than any of them.
It's a machining process, how they used to bore the cam bores.
And the lifter bores, because you could find out the lifter bores would be 10 thousandths off just the one right adjacent to it.
Yeah, here's a little tip if you're into GMs. Look at the back of the block, because they would drill from the front down. On the back of the block, there's a little pad for where you put the freeze plug in the back. Now, not all of them, but this is just a quick check. If you look at where the cam bearing is set, if it's in the center of that, it's usually pretty centered. But I've seen those things almost 100 thousandths out of line, either direction, up or down, and whatnot. And that's usually what tends to eat those cams. And 9 times out of 10, a Chevrolet is going to take out the back 4 cylinders on the camshaft at some point.
And here's another thing too that you got to be aware of. Chevrolet, and it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just the Chevrolet has the smallest diameter lifter out of all of them. Yeah. So it technically has the least amount of surface area on the camshaft at one point.
Yeah. The foot's the smallest. It's it's 842, but the effective, I think it's like 790 after chamfer. So it's a very small footprint.
Yeah, and so that's why, because you have such smaller area, that's why they were actually prone to eating camshafts. But all GMs across the board essentially use that same diameter lifter. But the Chevrolet Chevrolet was bad at it just because of the machining process. Let's face it. I mean, a Chevrolet was the poor man's car, right? So they didn't spend extra money and time on engineering and metallurgy and all that stuff. It was literally like just get you in and get you out the door and basic.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
it
the one
was.
thing they had to lock down though was the oiling on the crankshafts. 100% they had the best oiling on crankshafts.
Oh, I
And
don't,
that
I don't
actually
know. I
comes
bet
from,
Chevrolet probably did. I mean, that's
yeah,
why they
well actually
lived.
it was actually Callie's, John Callie's, is the one who perfected this. He actually did it for Pontiac. And they were teching at angles of where the oil would come in for on the rod for the laminar flow, so that way it was ahead of the rod. And he found out that it was 80%. So then Pontiac paid for that money a lot. So then they shared that information with GM, and then Chevrolet put it into their applications. That's the reason why a GM crank over, like say, a Ford or a Chrysler could RPM to the moon and still survive is for that very reason right there, was the oiling from the crankshaft. And most crankshafts nowadays that are performance are based off of that style of oiling.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why they all become internal balance.
Yeah. Well,
If you
it's
go like
really
race
it's how the oiling for like the top shell and where it
Mhm.
comes onto the rod. Typically, it's going to come in, right at about 90 degrees on the main, right? But it's going to
Mhm.
come out at about 80 on the rod itself. And it's a straight shot style of oiling. And so then what it's doing is that the highest load is here, but it's feeding oil on here. So as this comes around, it's going to create a flow, a laminar across the rod bearing. And it's actually in the gap part. So the high load is here, the oil's coming out here. And so the oil will come around as it comes back down, and that way it can spread out across the bearing face. They tried, like, you just intuitively you're thinking, oh, I want the oil to come out right underneath the rod. Well, the problem is that's the highest point, so you're going to have it's going to take a lot more pressure to push that up and get it out and spread it
right.
across.
Well, it's having to fight gravity. It's having to fight
Every centripetal force,
right,
because you're going to
with
have
the shape of
losses.
everything. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
Gotcha.
So this way, if it's the highest load is here and you're putting it out here, and then it hits the rod bearing and then spreads out across that, and just like with anything, you're going to create it's going to be essentially laminar flow. Plus, it creates a vacuum on it. So that way, when it goes across, it's like a boat, stuck in the mud. It's the same type of deal. It just goes right across, and that way it's on a cushion of oil, and that's the highest part of the load.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, Michael Schmidt says if the piston needed to come out to do a quick hone and re-ring on that cylinder for a quick fix, would you use a ridge reamer to get the piston out, or is that too old school? Well, no, there's still a need for the ridge reamer, but okay. The easy way to tell is when you go to pull that piston out, if it's got a groove at the top of the cylinder that you can catch your fingernail on, you need to ridge ream it, but because otherwise it's going to be almost impossible to get out of there.
Yeah.
You can't get the rings to retract any further to go up in that groove, right? So it'd always be catching on the rings all the way up. Now you can hammer it out, but it's going to destroy your piston generally.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're just trying to do a quick re-ring job and throw it back in. I'd ridge ream the sucker until it's somewhat smooth. And then, I mean, if you wanted to get creative, you could actually hone it just that top quarter inch or whatever you got there to get it nice and smooth and then knock a piston out.
A
And
lot of
then
the
you're going to,
Slant sixes that I take apart, most of that ridge I thought was actually steel. I thought it was super tapered. That was actually just carbon that was built up and literally petrified, because you got 200,000 that those things are in the hole. So I have a ridge cutter just to get the carbon off. That's been like, it's like petrified
caked
on
on.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
caked on.
rock. Yeah.
Let's see. Fanbase Mon Repeat says Dallas, a scored wall block is called a C-class engine. Drove one 230,000 miles like that. It finally wore enough. It couldn't pull the car. Ran great, but didn't go anywhere. Yeah, I imagine it didn't have much compression left after that.
Yeah.
When they get that bad, that's when it's time for a 40 to 60 over and then throw some new rings and pistons in it.
Yeah, right.
Mohawk 62 says we used to use Coca-Cola down the carb. I've heard that too.
Yeah.
I've never seen what the cleaning process of how it actually affects it. Maybe that's something that's worthwhile.
It's
Is
just
like
it's actually just kind of like, it's like, imagine like sea foam. So it's hot, you pour Coca-Cola down there, and then you let the Coke sit in the piston, or you can actually just put it at the top of the piston out, because Coca-Cola will eat anything. It literally will eat some of the
Yeah, well, I
aluminum
figured
too.
it's got acid in it, so
Oh yeah, and it's terrible. So yeah, you can put it down there and it will clean it. And I've ran Coca-Cola while it was running. I tried that, but you had to have it flat. But I was actually running it through the carburetor. I was going up Scripps Fire Parkway in the back of my hill back there, when I used to do tune-ups up that hill, and it worked up just about the same as distilled water. But he's right. If you put it down there, get it hot, pour it down each cylinder, and then just let it sit for about an hour or so, it will burn all that crap off the top of it. But make sure that
huh.
your cat's is disconnected, because all that shit's going to come right out.
And Danny Boyd says even straight water down the carb can help if done right. It steam cleans the cylinder is what happens. And again, you got to do it just like the transmission fluid, where you're holding the throttle open and just forcing it down his throat. And you got to keep it running. So it's got to get enough air, enough fuel, and have enough RPM to overcome you pouring water down it. Because, I mean, you know how it runs when you get a little bit of water in the carburetor, right? A little bit of water in the fuel. Imagine when you're just pouring like a whole cup load down there.
Here's one thing is, you can go down to Home Depot. What I used to do is I used to get a 1 gallon thing of distilled water. I'd have a couple of them on the floorboard, carburetor up and running. I'd run a hose to the PCV valve, and then I'd run a quarter turn valve on it with a very small going into the hose. So I would get the car nice and hot, and I would drive it up the hill. And what I would do is I would floor it, and then I would open up the valve until the car stopped accelerating up the hill, and then hold your hand on it. Obviously, you don't open it up till the car stops accelerating, then slows down, but you just want to keep it so it stops accelerating. Hold that speed and floor it all the way up the hill, and before you get to the top of the hill, shut it off. Let it burn all that crap that's in there before you come to the top and actually hit a light. And then come back down the hill, run it down the hill, and then do it again. Typically, when you come back, you're going to have to change the plugs, because whatever was on the cylinder is going to be on your plugs now. So sometimes carry an extra set of plugs. I actually done it and been stranded on Scripps Fire Parkway there a couple times. So
And Dust Devil Garage says, or you could exclusively build small block Magnum motors and never see a ridge again. You know what? That wasn't just exclusively small block Magnums. The Buicks were high nickel blocks way back in the day. I've only had to bore just a few. Usually they don't even get a ring ridge at all.
yeah,
They will taper if they get hot, but most of the time I just go through, check it. If it's relatively close, I just hone it and rings and bearings and go.
right.
And then Danny Boyd says, and not hydrolock. But a small block Fords like were that high nickel block content in the 80s.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
that's why take it out of overdrive, go up the hill, usually in third gear, make sure it's got some RPM in it. And it typically, if it's floored, it's going to be bringing in a lot of air, and that water is going to be hitting that air and basically just vaporizing into a mist. It's not going to be, a solid, non-compressible object at that point. Basically, you're just creating steam. You're making a steam engine now, essentially, is what you're doing.
Yeah. So, and Danny Boyd says, do not hydrolock it. So don't put your garden hose down there while you're trying to do this.
No.
Right. But LC2 Kid is your turbo Buick factory code LC2. Old school formula of GM engine or top engine clean worked well too. I have never tried that stuff. I don't know if you can even buy the old school formula if it's still available from GM or not.
May cause cancer in certain people.
It might cause cancer to an animal flipped upside down on a Wednesday.
Right. So yeah, they stopped that.
Yeah. Clint Street Machine says basically waterboarding your engine. That's 100% the truth. That's
Yes.
what you're doing. Give me the position. Let's see. LC2 Kid says the 3.8 Buick V6 blocks are very hard as well. All the Buick engines had high nickel content from pretty much day one. That was a carryover from the Nailhead days. And Dust Devil Garage says he's just being silly. No, man, I know those Magnums are high nickel.
They're good. They're good blocks, man.
Yeah. Michael Schmidt, since you're mentioning ridges, do need cars get ridges too, or has there been such an improvement in ring tech that ridges form less? It's the block technology on those.
Yep.
There's been a couple of things that's helped out.
Rings too, because they're thinner.
The rings are thinner, but they also generally are moly rings. Anything past like 1984 or 5 almost all of them had moly rings at that point. And
Mm-hmm.
then the later, like 90s, majority of them were plasma moly, like steel faced. It's a ductile iron ring with plasma moly on the outside.
Yeah.
And those ductile iron rings, you'll know when you find one because you're going to take it off the engine and that thing will spring and it'll go right back to its shape. And you can stretch it out as far as you want and it will not break. You can literally take it, twist it up, and it will not break.
Oh yeah, and another thing too is that the rings now are a lower tension. They're much lower tension rings.
And so Michael Schmidt says, "Yeah, but we got you, buddy. We figured it out after reading it. I kind of wish I would have seen this before I butchered it all up, but yeah, we got it covered, man. So yeah, it's a lot of it's cylinder wall. It is a block technology where the blocks are much harder, and then the rings themselves are different types of rings. Like Chevrolets back in the day used to always get cast rings, and like I said, they're cheap, right? But cast rings, what are they notorious for? Chewing up your block. They chew up your block pretty good.
Right. Yeah. Also, too, believe it or not, oil's gotten better too. If we say that they've taken all the zinc and the phosphorus out, yeah, that's right, for catalytic converters, but the oil technology is actually better than it was back then.
Okay, Dead Pedal Motors got one for you. What's your build? Twin turbo supercharged NA or nitrous motor, and why? Oh, well, you're posing a question here, and we already have some topics that we were wanting to discuss tonight.
Yeah. Well, here's the question: is what are we doing?
That's what you should be building your engine for? Is the practical application of what you're going to be using it for?
Yeah. If it's something where I've got low budget and I want to go fast, nitrous. If it's something that I want to come out of a corner and go fast, supercharged. If it's drag racing, twin turbo. That's for me. Because
technically, if you're land speed record racing, twin turbo as well.
Yes. Well, yeah. I was just thinking about for what we do, but yes, anything that it's maximum amount of free-ish horsepower, it'd be the turbo, and that's what I want. The supercharged, it's going to be boost right now. Typically, like a positive displacement, like a root style blower. I would want something like that coming out of corner because you're going to lower RPM. You're going high, you're going back low, and going back high. But personally, if I'm road racing, I would just have NA because that way I can literally flat foot it coming out of the corner, and there's a lot more of the driving rather than playing the pedal game and keeping that rear end from coming back around.
Let's see. Miss Catchy says that they told me that roller lifters cause cancer in California. Yeah, just about anything in California causes cancer. If you haven't noticed, like I don't know where you're at, Miss Catchy, but I think you're in Australia, I believe. But here in America, our EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, they smash everybody that has anything to do with cars anymore.
It's ruined.
There's limited places that chrome because chromium causes cancer, and they minimize who has access to it, and then they make the machines so dang expensive that you can't go get anything chrome for a reasonable price.
Yep.
They push them out of business. So, but they slap stickers on everything here in the U.S., and I wouldn't be surprised if that roller lifter had some kind of grease on it that would cause cancer in lab rats on Wednesday afternoon after drinking a Coca-Cola while facing upside down with low blood pressure.
I think it's the anti-rust properties that are in the fluid. That's probably what they're talking about. As far as that's what you don't want to touch. Yeah, exactly.
Cosmoline causes cancer.
Yeah.
What I have noticed is living causes cancer as well.
Oxygen's going to cause cancer, dude.
Off yourself if you don't want cancer.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, Bear Rose Garage says my wood chipper has a warning sticker on it that says it will cause reproductive harm if they're dumb enough to try that. We all them to do it. Okay, now that what comes to my mind is that Fargo scene with the wood chipper.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I can see some idiot putting their nuts over there, like, oh, look at this, and then
Right.
But
like I've said this before, and everyone said this thing. We should just take the warning stickers off of everything,
and life will sort itself out.
Life will sort itself out.
Yeah, that was what our Generation X. It was like We didn't have any helmets, seat belts, none of that crap, man.
Get tough or die.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Get tough
It
or
was
die.
like our parents were all at work all day long. So when you got together with the neighbors in summertime for every summer, every single summer vacation from school, I got like in big trouble, like police, the whole 9 yards, big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because nobody's parents were ever home,
No,
and then we were always playing in the street. I remember my buddy, he made a ramp for a bicycle, right? And it must have been 4 foot off the ground. This ramp is a four by
like
eight sheet
this,
of
right?
plywood. Yeah. And it was a 4 by 8 sheet of plywood, like real plywood, like 1 inch or 3/4 inch plywood, right? And it was like 4 feet off the ground.
Yep.
So this thing had like a extreme angle to it, maybe a 45. Man, and you know what? Back then, when you were trying to ramp a bike, there was no kid that just like pedaled up to it like slowly, leisurely. You got up off the coming down a hill, pedaling as fast as you could, and that's because BMX bikes, that's what they're made for,
That's right.
right? That's
Speed.
what the movie Rad taught us. And dude, you'd hit that
Send me
ramp
an
and go
angel.
freaking 25 feet in the air after it bent the fork under, and
Yeah.
flattened the wheel. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you came down, that was when you started worrying about stuff. And I don't know how many times I hit the handlebars on my chest and it would knock the wind out of you, is what they used to call it. But it's literally like shutting your heart off for like 2-3 beats. And oh my God, man. 1980s in the streets.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So Junkyard D says Mythbusters question: is it necessary to loosen valve train in off season to prevent valve spring fatigue? Yes, that's a normal practice.
It's a normal practice, but actually with nowadays with the valve springs, it's really not necessary. And everyone's going to say something else on that, but if it's a solid roller camshaft, to prevent spring failure, you don't need to. But what you're going to help not fail is the pressure on the lobe, the pressure, because remember now you're talking about a multiplication of pressure back down if you have a valve open, and that's going to be pressuring. Obviously, these are really hard products, but it's still, what's the weakest link on this? It's going to be the little tiny rollers inside the wheel, and that's where the most of the pressure is going to go. Because if you have 500 pounds on that, you're going to have 750 at the wheel because of the rocker arm ratio if it's 1.5. So we've tested this for the valve spring failure. No, but also too, if you back them off, you don't have your cylinders open to the air elements. So there's a lot of positives to do it. Do I do it? Absolutely. But there's a lot of pluses to it. But for absolute, just for the valve spring part of it, it's not necessary.
Let's see. LC2K here is a good question. DLC coating on cam lobes for preventing or helping prevent wiping lobes. Is it too slick or will cause roller to slide?
Yeah, it will not rotate the lifter. That's the problem.
Well, he's talking about, I think he's talking about a roller camshaft, but I guess it would be kind of like a wet banana, right?
Oh,
I don't think the roller would roll all that well on DLC cam lobes. Shane was talking about comp cams will be coming out with a new line of lifters that are DLC coated here really soon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're actually already out, right?
Yeah, the hydraulics for the Chevrolets are out. We're working on the solid ones and a few other things for the Fords and the Chrysler applications.
And John Wilmer says, of course, you're wearing bike helmets, Dallas.
Sure.
Yeah,
I did. It was called a hat. I turned it on backwards.
The reality of it is no one made a bike helmet back then. And if you had one, you were probably one of them special kids that their mom had a leash on and attach you to the tree out in front of the school.
If you showed up at the jumps, right? At the jumps, so
with the helmet on?
The helmet on, you'd probably get your butt kicked.
Yeah, you would probably get your butt kicked. Yeah. And then you go home and because you got your butt kicked, your dad would kick your butt. And
yeah, why aren't your knuckles bloody? Why did you fight back?
Did you hit him back? No, they beat me up because I had a bike helmet. But I guess if you were in a household that was forcing you to wear bike helmets, your dad probably wouldn't beat your ass anyway. He'd come and coddle you and tell you everything's okay, take you out for ice cream.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mine, like, man, I remember coming home some of the fights and you're like all bloody and what happened? Oh, I got in a fight today. Did you kick the other kid's ass? Well, I gave him everything I could, right? but
Yeah.
he'd be madder than hell if he just ran away.
Yeah.
Oh no, I got on my bike and rode away. Oh no, now you're in trouble.
My uncles would go, he was like, you get in a fight? Yeah. He goes, let me see your hands. And then if your knuckles were good, they were lumped up. Okay, well, you did the best you could. Yes, I did everything I could,
Yeah.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, just the way it is.
Let's see. Blue Grit Garage says I have a set of 7351 Cleveland heads. The guides seem tight and the valves have not sunk. Do I need hardened seats with a 268 cam? And I do not plan on taking long highway trips, 50 miles or less.
Look here, I'm going to tell you what I do. My green dart, the Lizard King. Everybody knows how many miles I've put onto that car, right? I put regular gas in it. It still has unhardened seats on the exhaust, and I don't care. It just is what it is. I don't put any extra additives in it. I just don't even worry about it. I'm running very low spring pressures, and I drive the piss out of it. So I just don't worry about it on something like that. That's just me, though. If you're doing something small like that, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd just put a little additive in the gas and call it good.
But the way I look at it is okay, how many miles are you going to drive it? And be honest,
Mm-hmm.
how many miles are you going to drive this thing per year? Is it ever going to see 12,000 miles? I bet it probably wouldn't even see 12,000 miles in 1 year.
Yeah.
It's probably more like 1,000 miles. And
yeah.
really what kills the hardened valve seats is them constantly running under load going down the road and that heat, right? And it really doesn't do anything to the heart or to the valve seat except for it's like an anvil and a piece of and a hammer and a piece of metal. And all you do is pound on that metal while it's hot, and it's eventually just going to smoosh it out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that you're going to really have too much of a problem if you don't go crazy on, like Shane was saying, your springs, because the springs is essentially your hammer, and it's providing what force that the valve is going to abuse toward that seat.
And get some soft lobes. Get some easy lobes on there.
Well, he's got a 268H. Well, I don't know if it's an H, but it's a 268 cam. And I'm assuming that's a comp 268H, is what I'm thinking. But that camshaft is not too aggressive, and it doesn't have a huge buttload of lift. If you go easy on the springs, I think you'll be okay. Just don't go overboard on them, and then be realistic about how many miles you're going to drive it that year. If it's going to be anything less than probably 5,000 miles a year, you'll probably be all right, and you'll get at least 20 years out of them.
I wouldn't worry about it, dude.
Yeah, I'd lap the valves and put them in and send it.
Exactly. I'm testing camshafts in my Slant 6 for the longest time. I would take them out. I would lap the valves. Take me 5 minutes with a drill and a hose. I'd clean them up, put it back in there, and send the thing on down the road.
Clayton's Toolbox says, from what I'm reading, the ideal wide open throttle AFR in most older V8s is 12.5 to 13 to 1. Does that sound about right? How does 5 to 10% ethanol affect this? Should it be richer, the E10?
No,
your airfill ratio, should not be richer, the number wise.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. Every engine wants something slightly different because it's going to depend on your overlap triangle, how big the camshaft is. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into the air fuel mixture because sometimes you're going to be blowing fuel right out the back. So typically it'll read richer just because there's unburned fuel in there, but it just runs happier. So every engine's going to be different. 12.5 is a good starting point. Work your way down as the car speeds up. It's going to speed up a little bit with wrench, but you'll also with the lean, but also to look at the plugs. Plugs will tell you everything you need to know. If they've got like a little light tan on them, man, they're golden. Just leave it alone. But 12.5 is a great starting point. That's where I would be.
Yeah, and here's the thing that you got to keep in mind: your air fuel ratio is not going to change even with the ethanol in it. It's not the only thing you're going to see is maybe to achieve the air fuel ratio, you're going to have to be up one jet size more
fuel.
just to achieve that air fuel ratio like you had before with just straight gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll probably, instead of having like a 72 jet in there, you might have a 73 jet in there to give you that target 12.5 to 1 that you're shooting for.
With E10, yeah.
But that's about all you're going to really see.
Yeah, remember when Unical 76 was the very first one that had the high ethanol? So when I would first start up my cars, I would run the Unical 76. Was it 91? It was actually 92 at the time. in San Diego, and if I can get the jets I needed, I would go run that fuel to go street race because it had the highest ethanol, and it would always not typically run as fat, burn out the plugs.
So One-Eyed Cat says today's generation will never have the scars with this kids. Man, that was living. I'll tell you what, I was laid up a lot, dude.
Right.
Doing really stupid stuff, but
I've taken my kids to the doctor for checkups, and the doctor's so happy because he looks at their knees and he sees skinned up knees, skinned up elbows. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we ride our bikes. They crash. And he goes, oh, we just don't see that anymore. He's an older guy. So, yeah, I think it's awesome.
Let's see. Levi says, what's one technology or technique that you wish never came about in the automotive industry? That I wish never came about? Electronics?
Well, no, just full-blown electric. I personally believe a hybrid is EV, essentially, yeah. I would say that I think a hybrid is the most ideal way. Use the electric around to get the car motivated, and then use the engine itself to keep it going down the road at a constant rate, because that's where the electric is.
I've been seeing this for years. Diesel electric is the way to go on that.
Yeah.
Diesel electric. Hands down. Yeah. But I think the biggest downfall in the past 20 or 30 years has been like the CAN bus technology, where everything is networked through the car and it all runs through one major computer. And if one of those systems fails, it works like a SCSI drive. If you're familiar with this old 80s SCSI drive, if you were to tank the drive on a SCSI drive, it now becomes the end terminator and it opens the circuit. So it can't read anything on the SCSI bus at all. So if you had a hard drive and a printer and everything all in line, once that one hard drive took a crap, everything else behind it you couldn't even use or see. And even though the terminator for that circuit was on the other end, allowing it to run a loop all the way back to the computer, it would crash the whole entire SCSI bus.
Yeah.
The CAN bus seems to be the same damn thing, where it has your backup camera, gets some bird poop on it, and it stops working. And next thing you know, your fuel pressure sending unit doesn't work. Right. Your seats won't move. Your electric seat heater comes on and burns up your wife's snapper in the middle of the day. And it's like, what in the hell is going on with the electrical in this car? And it's because of that CAN bus.
Yeah. See, I don't have that problem. I don't have anything that runs that kind of CAN bus. So I've never had anything that had a CAN, bus style system. So I've seen that in other people's cars, but nothing on mine.
Yeah, CAN bus technology has been the worst.
Yeah. Okay.
John Wilmer says the eBay turbo. That's a big downside on drag racing, but I think he was looking at automotive throughout the whole automotive community. I don't like where the street outlaws scene, everybody wanting to be some gangster freaking drug dealing street drag racer is a deal. I don't see where that came from. I don't. I mean, I like heads up stuff. I don't like the way that's gone, because it's like thug street racing, wannabe stupid shit.
Yeah. It's the male soap opera. I'm over it. I just like to go out there and race, have fun.
Let's see.
There was one about valve angles and stuff.
That's this one here, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's the one I was just getting to.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Michael Schmidt says, what's your plans on what valve seat angles to use if you're trying to improve flow and power? Most valve angles seem to be 45 degrees. Other angles better.
Well, I do know that on the valve and the cylinder head, you do have a couple different valves. So like on the valve, I'm going to have 30 degrees on the face and like say a 15-degree back cut to help with flow. On cylinder head, typically on the throat angle, you're going to be like say 45 to like 60, I think. Seats can be obviously 30. Then you're going to have like I think it's like a 15-degree top cut and then some sort of radius that's actually on the seat itself. That seems to be the best for me. But once again, I've only done very, very basic.
The trick that I've heard is 45 degrees is actually the best, but the valve itself if you smooth the valve, it improves flow by like 10%.
Yeah.
And so just leave your 45, leave the 45 on the valve and the seat, I guess, and smooth out the valve with a file.
Yeah.
But
30 to 45 is typical. Yeah. That's right. On the seat. Yeah.
Let's see.
I agree with that.
All right.
I was trying to go at the top of my head on numbers.
Yeah, Danny Boyd's saying can't bus. So Michael Schmidt says $100,000 trucks. Wish there were cheap, bare bones, efficient trucks. You know what? Here's what I think is if you were an entrepreneurial person, you listen, Dylan Levi. If you're an entrepreneurial young guy and you're starting life over now, I think that there's a niche where you could go buy like some. You stick with the vehicles that they made a zillion of, right? Go buy like an F-150 from 1980 to 1996, okay? And
Everywhere.
completely refurbish it. Buy all Ford Motorcraft parts and go from the front to the back, completely refurbish the whole thing, repaint stuff, the whole 9 yards. And when it's done and you got 30 grand in a truck, you sell it for 45 grand. Okay. You're still literally half the price of a new truck today. But
and
people already know what they're going to get with the 80 to 96 truck. They know it's going to run for 500,000 miles.
Right.
Yeah. Like, hey, man, this one's completely bone stock, but it'll go for 500,000 miles. And there is no government controls on it. There's no CAN bus. There's no BS stuff. And you shouldn't have to replace a damn thing for the next 5 years.
And there's no button to stop the damn thing. You know, no one can say, Shane stops driving right now.
Yeah,
boop, boop.
yeah. You've met your requirement for driving this month. We're shutting you down.
Right.
No, it doesn't happen. But I think that's if you were an entrepreneurial person and you were focused on vehicles that they make a buttload of, S10 pickups. Oh my God, you could clean house. Because look at the S10 derivative today. Go buy a Colorado or Canyon. It's $65,000 for just a shitbox one, right?
Yeah.
No, they got so far away from what the mini trucks were.
Yeah. My first truck was brand new. It was a Dodge D50 truck. Remember those? The little Ram. It was a Mitsubishi Mighty Max. Yeah, it was $2,500. It was stripped down, had a 4-cylinder, 5-speed, roll down windows, no locks. I mean, just no power, anything. Didn't even come with a radio. It was $2,500. It had like 200 miles on it. You can't. You're not going to buy anything like that.
I bought a brand new S10 for $8,999 in 1995, the beginning of '95.
Yeah, mine was 87. I bought it before. I had a paper route, so I wanted to go to the desert, ride my motorcycle. So I bought this. I wasn't old enough to drive it. My dad would drive it, but I did buy a truck, and it was an 86. It was a 1 year later model, so they were trying to move it. So I got it cheap as hell. It was awesome. I drove that truck forever.
Yeah, LC2 Kid says, don't forget the SCSI had the end cap. That's what I was talking about, the terminator on the end of it. So it would tell them that's the end of the circuit, and it loops back through to the computer, and it would recognize all that stuff.
That's terrible.
Yeah, if it had a failure in somewhere in line in that circuit, it would dump the whole circuit, and it wouldn't function whatsoever.
Ugh.
But okay. Clayton's Toolbox says, race car build. I need a gas pedal assembly. I know someone offers these, but I would rather get something from the junkyard. Is there a donor vehicle with a nice gas pedal assembly I could use? I don't know what you're putting it in, and I don't know how your carburetor functions, but
yeah.
Okay, cable options. Man, I tell you what, any GM from like, I'd say probably like 74 to 96, like B-body full-size car, would have a really nice cable assembly in it that you could use.
And a low car goes right into that.
If you're talking about the rod, like a linkage rod,
just
what's the easiest adaptable one with the linkage rod?
I've only used the cables because I've either used GM or I've used the Chrysler ones, because Chrysler ones, the low cars go right into it also.
Does it really? Okay. Well, then try Chrysler or GM. I get a lot of stuff off of B bodies because there always tends to be a ton of them, and then no one gives a crap about them. You know, you'll get inside of them and it's like completely nice and cush interior all still there, and you're like, God, man, I hate to see this sucker go to the junkyard. This is, I'll tell you something. Like, I think I may have told this on here before. I don't remember. I had a B-body wagon. I had a '92 Caprice B-body wagon. The bubbly ones is what they call them, the bubble wagons, and it was, God, this was 2010. So this wagon here, it is 20 years old, right? Like, I'm driving it around. We get out to Southern California, and my brother-in-law has this like Dodge Avenger. He's putting a motor in. He needs to get a motor. And I said, hey, man, I've been reading a lot of this on, the magazines. I got a good idea of what we need to do. We'll go in there and find a motor, and you pull the oil on it. You look at the antifreeze. You smell the underside of the oil fill cap, whole 9 yards. Because you don't, in California, it used to be $63.78 for a takeout motor. But you didn't know what you're going to get. It's literally a crapshoot. Was it the motor that caused it to be there? Was it bad maintenance? So they came up with these basic rules of thumb that you would do. Well, we found out it was a motor out of like a Sebring, I think, but it's the same engine.
Yeah.
And I pull up in my 92 Caprice wagon. We're going to load the motor in the back. And the guy says, hey, you dropping off the car? And I said, no, this is what I freaking drive. Right. That's when I realized that I'm not like everyone else. Right. Like, I literally will drive something until there's nothing left to drive.
Yeah.
And most people will not. And the sad part was when he asked me that, I started thinking about it. Damn, my car does look worse than the rest of the stuff in the junkyard. So,
but underneath it's perfect. Just like with me, I've been driving my Dart. For the past 2 weeks, I've been driving my green Dart, actually last week I drove the Beaver, but people are like, aren't you hot? And I'm like, man, you get in the car, you roll down the windows and you just start driving and you're fine, so they're like, how do you drive something like that? I'm just like, to me, it's much more comfortable. It's easier to drive. To me, I feel more comfortable in something like that than this box that you're contained in, with boxing gloves and a big cushy pillow. I just don't. I don't feel comfortable in it personally. It's just my opinion, but yeah.
Well, so Blue Grit says, thanks, Dallas, Shane, and Bear Rose. I'll be driving maybe 2,500 miles a year. So he was the one asking about the Cleveland heads. Oh, okay. If you want, man, just throw some. You can go down where you can get some race gas at. Yeah, throw a couple of gallons of VP 110 in there. It'll be leaded. It'll lubricate what you got for good enough for what you do.
Yeah, and in the Slant 6, I don't do it, but when I had the 66 Dart, they had some of that lead still, and it was just a little squeezer top. You squeeze it up and put a little bit, throw it in the tank, and then fill it up. It'll run with that forever.
So we got a lot of comments about the Street Outlaw stuff.
It's true.
Max Wedge Dick Ashley says, when I raced in Southern California, there was guys arguing and betting in the staging lanes. I didn't care for it. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that either. We had a guy when Shane and I were doing Match Race Madness. There used to be a lot of guys that would come out there. Southern California has some steep street racing history because you used to have Big Willie out there running the Brotherhood of Street Racers, right? Yep. And that's where they raced, was Terminal Island, just outside of Los Angeles near Long Beach. And a lot of those guys, because a lot of the tracks closed down in Southern California, they ended up down in Verona where we're doing these Match Race Madness because it's kind of right up their alley, right?
Yeah.
And no lie, there was this dude, he was big black guy, like broad shoulders, and you could tell the guy had some clout. He had a cane, and you remember that guy with the cane?
Mm-hmm.
And he had like maybe a broken hip or something, and
he would line you up. Yeah. Yep.
And when he found something that he thought was neat, and he loved my T-Bird for some reason, and it's just because nobody else had one, I think. But he would ask me, "Hey, you want me to line you up?" And I'm like, "No, I don't see any reason for that. I just roll forward till I see the lights." And oh man, all the guys like when I line them up, and I'm like, is this for me or is this for him? He wanted to be out there part of it, and everybody's seeing him, right? And plus he got to stand there right on the line to watch you go. That's what I think it really was.
Exactly what it was. Because Bronas were Nazis about that. Remember, they would shut down the racing if there was too many people at the line.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but we had, oh gosh, and then when the Street Outlaws thing got big, the crowds are like the first time, a couple of times I went to that Match Race Madness deal was like just like a regular race.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably like, oh, halfway through 2015, I guess it was when I got out there.
Yeah.
It started getting crowded and bigger crowds and more people in the staging lanes to the point where you're just like, get the F out of the way. I got to get up to the line, you know, and you guys are in the way. But yeah, they were. Verona was pretty much the tech guy was very anal about a lot of stuff, right? And rightfully so. There was a lot of Hondas blowing up every pass out there.
It's true, right?
Let's see. Levi's Backyard Performance No Prep Kings is the worst for drama and boring racing. The best thing they did was bring hometown class in, which is just local heads up racers. Oh, I didn't even know they did that. So I haven't watched it not one time. They lost me after about season when everybody started going to pro mods, and then they kicked Farm Truck and Asian to the curb. That's when I was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this. This is jump the shark, as they call it.
I think that was what, 17, wasn't it? 16 or 17, wasn't that?
Yeah, somewhere around there. When they started getting away from real street cars and they're bringing out like, ringers.
Well, when they were arguing about, look, it's got 90% quarter panels on it, and it's a full tubular chassis with literally a floppy shell that's been bolted down on top of it. That's not a car in my book. That's a chassis car. That's still a pro mod.
Well, and I watched it for I can't remember the first couple of seasons. There was a fat guy that ran like a gold Mustang that his son drove.
Oh yeah.
That guy was always trying to compete, and he had like a legit car.
Yeah.
And he was trying to keep up with these guys with pro mod stuff, and it just ran him off is what really happened. Then you had like the Cuddy. The same thing happened to that one. It was a turbo LS, I think, but it wasn't a tube chassis car. It was the G-body shuffle. That's where everybody got coined with that phrase, the G-body shuffle, but that's because that Cutlass would leave like that. But all that stuff went away, and it got down to pro mods with carbon fiber bodies and
extended wheelbases and
I was not into the taking a stickered up race car, drilling a couple holes and putting lights on it does not make it a street car.
No.
Go get your kids in it, go get some groceries in it, pull something to the dump with it. That's a street car. I mean,
and that's one thing I can say about our
blurred lines of it. I've always hated the blurred lines.
And that's where I say about my car and your car is that they're literally, my car still has lights on it, still has functioning lights and everything. It is a legit street car. I just recently took the wiper blade motor out of it, but I can flip it around and put it, because I didn't have room for where I was going to be. But I could literally put it back in there, and it's got all the functioning parts, windows roll down, all the stuff. I mean, it still has actual, glass light bulbs in it. So it's a legit car, and to run, in the fives with a legit car is pretty decent. I mean, I could take, 500 pounds out of the car and then it'd be faster, but then it's not a car to me anymore. Just my opinion.
So we're going to take time for our non-sponsor here, but Mr. Wilburn, Shane and I talk to him like almost every day, right? We've got like our own little ring going on.
Us three, we're like, three stooges, right?
Yeah. So John's gentlemen, may I drop this plug here? Of course we'll let you. We got nothing but time here. Content creative workshop this Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Time, made for the No Name 500 guys, but all are welcome. So if you need to be brushed up on some of your YouTube content, you need familiarization with tagging. Like, I haven't changed the tags for Shane and I's live show for how long have we been doing this now? 5 years, 4 years? I don't know. It seems like a millennia.
Yeah,
it's 3 years maybe. I haven't changed the tags on it not one time.
I think coming up is going to be 3 years. I think that's when maybe 2. Well, it's however long we started about the November before the No Name Nationals. So that would have been, so it's 3.5 years. Because I went up there to get my 500 subs, remember? And then that's when it ended. We found out it ended that Saturday night, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're talking. And then so we started it up that following Wednesday.
Huh. Yeah, well, shoot, it's over 100 degrees here, and I've been driving my TA with no AC, but I only drive 15 to 20 minutes to work. I'm doing the same, man. I got 95 S10, no air conditioning, and two. Well, what they used to call it? I got
60-mile-an-hour air conditioning.
Yeah, 60 mile an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, 60-mile-an-hour air conditioning. You know, I got vent window. What I do is I start the car up, I roll down both windows. I have the vent window, and I got the ball cooler on the Dart. I just drive right down the road. It takes about 5 minutes, and then the air is blowing in, and it's nice.
I used to have a pretty good system with my Suburban because I could roll down the back window, and air would come in the side windows and go out the back. It would literally move the heated air out the back of the truck.
Yeah, that's why I roll down the side window, and all the air, the hot stagnant air, blows right out. So it's not
Well,
bad.
when I tried it with the S10, I just used a ball peen hammer and shattered the back window, and it sucks because when it rains, it just freaking pours in on me now.
Well, that's called your 5-mile-an-hour air conditioning, right?
I didn't do that.
That's your swamp cooler.
That may be cheaper than buying a new AC compressor, though.
Right,
So,
right.
John Wilburn says 3 clues that a track is a bad place to be: drinking, betting, 50 people on the starting line. If you see all that, run. It's just not my style. It is not my style. Let's see if we can catch up here. Max Wedge Dick Dastardly says, "What year's your T-Bird? I have ceramic brake pads. You can have them. I got them when I ordered a front transmission seal. My T-Bird has strange brakes on it, man. I'm sorry, but mine is a 87, 88, and I have aftermarket strange brakes on the front." Oh, he says right here that for early 2000s. Yeah, that's not me.
Oh.
So if you haul the trash in it at the streetcar, you got to do streetcar stuff, legit family stuff with it.
Right.
Let's see. Bear Rose is saying that he hopes to see you at the next workshop. He's going to be there. Shane running a 5 and a legit heavy streetcar is tough. Competing with one is even tougher when everybody is building tube chassis. I'm sticking to my roots. Real deal real steel cars. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I that's just my opinion. That's just what I like. I like cars that are real cars that haul ass. That's just always been my thing.
Michael Schmidt's asking, curiosity question. You guys still have a relationship with UTG? Not so much. I don't. Not so much. It was nothing like, I hate Tony or anything like that.
Right.
Just Tony did me and quite a few people wrong when he got butthurt over something that somebody else did. So when I realized that he did not really value people, I didn't value Tony any longer, and I didn't want him. I mean, he was just going to use you. And that's what ended up happening, was that he used everybody for their content and then left them with nothing except for, I guess he went on a live not too long ago saying that we got like egos or I don't know, something ridiculous like that. But it couldn't be further from the truth. But to set the record straight, it really was just him getting butthurt over something that happened with somebody else that really I didn't have any involvement with, but he just devalued everyone else in that whole entire arena, and it was time to go.
Yeah, for me personally, he's never done anything wrong for me. I'm not defending him or anything. I'm just saying my personal experiences with him. He's never done anything wrong towards me, but that's just my experience.
Yeah, he's never really cheated me or nothing. It's just that, like, when I could tell that he did not really value the people that he was keeping around him, he was just using them for the content. It was like time to go. It's just like one of those things. If you have a relationship with a girl and you realize that she's just there so you can get free candy when you go to the movies,
right?
Kick it to the curb. You don't have to wait around for that. That's not the characteristics or the character values of a good person. So you don't do that. Tony was never there when I needed him. So Okay. Is that what it is? 2 and 45 AC? That might be what I was talking about there. Let's see.
2 and 45.
I
Yeah,
must be really, really, really behind.
yeah, you are.
No, I'm up here at 8:14. What time is it? 8:16.
There was been a lot.
Let's see. Dust Devil Garage says the 100-point restorations that never get driven are not street cars either.
No,
You can literally go buy a new car and make it not a street car by just not driving it, right? That's kind of the intended purpose of them.
And remember, these people race these things. These were hot rods. Just keep it a hot rod. That's just what it is. My 4 doors are drivers. My 2 doors are hot rods. That's the way I look at it.
Let's see here. Okay. Colleen's. Okay. Levi's saying that Colleen, I'll be happy when I get every ounce of the potential out of my car as far as performance, but as far as how it looks and the fun I get out of it. Absolutely. I love it. It's different in mine. Yeah. His car is just he's got an odd duck. He's got the Colonnade Laguna S3. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So the second part of tonight's Wednesday night tech talk there was a discussion that happened the other day for our next Mythbuster event. There was a kind of conversation that took place the other day about octane rated fuels and where we end up with on the octane rating and what it actually does and why and how it works.
What does it mean? Yeah.
Right. And so and I see this a lot where people that have, like, let's say, even like a car that you buy today, let's just say you get like a regular car. It's meant to run on regular gas, and people put 93 octane in them, and they think, the thing's going faster, or it's getting better mileage, or and what I call that is kind of like, everyone assumes that because they put the 93 in it, man, and she's got some steam now, and it couldn't be further from the truth. If it's a placebo effect that you're feeling, it's like taking the sugar pill that they told you was going to cure cancer, and now you don't have cancer, but did you have cancer to begin with? That's the placebo effect, and it's snake oil, right? So I'm going to try to explain, I guess, the reality of it with 87 octane fuel. In my opinion, has more energy in it because it explodes faster. The lower the octane, the faster the burn rate of the fuel.
It's more prone to detonation, so therefore it will detonate.
Right, but it will also burn faster than all the other fuels. And so, like, the lower the octane rating, the faster it is to burn. Now, I know diesel is not rated in octane, but diesel is rated in cetane. But diesel, if you've ever taken gasoline and thrown it on a fire, and then diesel fuel and thrown it on fire, you'll see a major difference between the two. Because one, the gasoline literally itself will not burn. You throw it in the air and throw it on a fire, all the atomized stuff will burn and it'll explode, right? But diesel fuel is like a violent freaking thing when you throw it in a fire. Really violent. And it doesn't have to be atomized all that good. And the liquid itself will burn. And it has if you were to put that on an octane rating scale, diesel fuel, it's probably somewhere around like 45, 50 octane. It burns really low. Okay, I'm getting off track. All right, so if you take your 87 octane car, and let's say your daily driver's got 8-to-1 compression, you're putting 87 in, you put 93 in, and you're thinking, man, I'm getting so much faster, the thing's running so much better. You get your placebo effect going on because there's no real gain in performance of it. Now, if you've taken the timing and jack it up 2-3 degrees, right, you think you're going to gain some performance, but it may be the cylinder head. At that point, the combination that you had before when you were running 87 octane gas might have been optimized. So if you just add timing in on an engine that you threw 93 octane gas in, there may be no gain. Or like my T-Bird, when I had bought, I got a set of AFD heads, which were Airflow Dynamics. They came out of Australia. They were in competition with CHI and the Ford C3 Yates heads. Okay. And the guy told me, he said, no more. When I picked up the heads, he says, I don't care what anybody tells you. Do not put the timing above 29 degrees total. It will not run. So I checked that. I went to West Tech Dyno in 2016 or 17, and I dynoed the car. We put it at 29, and then I went and put it at 31, and it lost 45 horsepower being at 31 degrees versus 29. And it's because of the efficiency of the combustion chamber and the cylinder head that it didn't need all that timing for it to run good, right? Chevrolets are notorious for 36 degrees total, 38 degrees total.
Small block Mopar and big block Mopar.
Is it really both of them same way?
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, and it's just because the combustion chamber is so inefficient, right? When you
Wedge
got
head.
a good head, like you've heard Shane, I say it many times over, buy the best head that you can buy.
Build around it.
Put everything else, together and work with just them cylinder heads. And then just keep building on top of that combo, and you'll eventually get to the point where that thing's stupid fast. But that's why cylinder heads.
Yeah, and that's the reason why Gen 3 Hemi, most of those are like 25, 22 to 1, 20 degrees of timing, is because it's super efficient cylinder head, and it works so well. And it doesn't really matter. We've tested them with, what's the low rating here? I think it's 87, or is it 88 here? I'm not sure.
It's 87, yeah.
Yeah, 87. And then we have 93. But if you don't have the compression for it, it really didn't make any difference, because the flame front's only going to move so fast across the cylinder. And like we were discussing earlier, that you're only going to be using the top 20% of the actual cylinder. That's where the flame is happening. The rest of it is just expanding gases until the valve opens. But the actual work is all over with by, it's 80 degrees a turn on the crankshaft. So, yeah.
Well, okay. So let me tell you where Octane does come into a big play on this, right? Octane comes into a big play. Let's say your 8-to-1 compression engine, you've now went up to 10-to-1 compression. And you're trying to take advantage of that compression, because every point in compression you go up is like a 10% increase in horsepower. Okay, so if you had 300 horsepower at 8-to-1, you want to 9-to-1 would be 10% more, so it's 30 more horse. And then you go up to 10-to-1, and then it's going to be, at that point would be like 330, so 33 horsepower on top of that. So you're looking at 363 horsepower. And that's just from compression ratio. You didn't do anything else. Nothing. Just compression ratio. Now here's where the problem lies. 87 Octane will not support that 10-to-1 compression without a camshaft that bleeds off tons of compression to make it work. Otherwise, you'll have pre-detonation. And even when you're using that camshaft, the camshaft is technically a crutch, because what's going to happen is the higher you go in RPM band, okay, the air doesn't have a possibility of moving in and out of the cylinder fast. And that's why a camshaft actually works. It tricks the engine into thinking that it has more compression than what it has, because it'll pull the air in, and the exhaust valve on the overlap stroke, that's what bleeds off the compression, is the intake open and the exhaust open at the same time. And that overlap period in there is what bleeds off the compression. Now, what happens is when it's pulling in air and the piston starts to move back up, air is the only, you have air, liquids, and solids, right? So gases, liquids, and solids is your three states of matter. When you have air is a gaseous state, and it compresses. It's the only state that will compress.
Yep.
Fluid does not compress. Solids do not compress. It really it compresses that air as the piston's moving up, and it doesn't have a chance to push it out. And then what happens is it's drawn in more air technically as the air is rushed in and filled the cylinder than what the cylinder technically allows.
Yeah, it's actually more air than the cylinder can actually be. And closing the intake valve closing is the most important event for that exact reason, because most of them close at, like, say, 50, 45, or 50 degrees after bottom dead center. So that piston is already on its way up. the air, it's already starting to compress, but the air coming in has got so much weight, it's already still, it's like basically supercharging the actual combustion chamber. The intake valve closes right at the right time, just so that way before it starts to push it back out. And so now you have a bigger charge in there than it would
You have
ever
an
see.
overfilled cylinder is what you
Mhm.
have,
Absolutely.
right? And it's the 8 pounds of shit in the 5-pound bag
Yeah.
is what you got. And then when you go to compress it, now your compression ratio goes up even more because it has more volume of air in that cylinder.
And
And
that's
that's what
why,
happens. That's where you start getting detonation
yes.
when you have an engine that has a lot of overlap on the camshaft. It gets high in the RPM range and it's moving the air in easier than it is out,
Yep.
and it overfills the cylinder, and you'll start getting high RPM detonation at, like, say, wherever your camshaft power band is at. Generally was what they'll tell you, 2500 to 6500. So at about
6500
20,
is
yeah,
usually the
about
number. Yeah.
2500. What's that?
6500 is normally the number that
The,
if you have a camshaft that's big, a high compression, but yet 87 octane will work. After 6500 is when you're going to start seeing anomalies happen, because the air is essentially is compressing itself. So now the compression ratio is now going back up because of high
right.
RPM,
It goes
and
up
you can't
higher.
control.
And
Yeah,
there's
you can't
another
control
thing
the
that happens
detonation.
too, was that air that's brought in is more than what the cylinder technically can hold.
Yes,
And your compression ratio
comes back up
it goes up slightly, but the heat in the cylinder goes up significantly.
much more.
Okay, because it's
Exactly.
now compressing more than what it normally holds.
Hmm.
So it's a very finite line. Now, when you do something like that, that's where you add in the higher octane fuel that burns slower, that eliminates the pre-detonation that you would have with that combination.
Yep.
Or you pull timing, and pulling timing. Let me tell you, that's just a crutch to get you home. Pulling timing is not the ideal thing. You'll lose 20, 30 horsepower. Um, I don't like pulling timing. There's another way to deal with it. Okay. So that is your dynamic compression ratio that you're dealing with there at that point. And just like we were talking about earlier with doing your compression test, that's you measuring essentially the static compression ratio,
Hmm.
is really what you're measuring there. As it's running, you're not really taking into account the valve because it's going so slow as it's turning it over. Um, you're not really taking into account valve timing uh, events. Um,
Well, yes, if your cam is large and you have a tight LSA, it will trick it into reading a higher
a
cranking
higher
compression than
a
it normally
cylinder
would.
pressure than what it normally is.
Yes, because
Yeah.
your timing events are sooner. If you retard them, it decreases it. So there's, and then
Now
tight.
that's what I was just going to bring up right here.
Yeah.
Camshaft advance and retard
Hmm.
will factor in massively
And
on where.
LSA, low separation angle.
Sure, yes, but
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is advancing and retarding the camshaft will play a factor huge in where your low compression engine or even your high compression engine can run on 87 octane gas.
Yeah.
Is where you've set that cam, and that's why it's important when you build something. You need to learn how to degree the camshaft, because if it's off center line by 4 degrees, 4 degrees makes a whole big difference if you're 4 degrees advanced versus 4 degrees retarded.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a huge, because that's, if you think about it, if it's off by 4 degrees, you could technically be 8 degrees difference than where you need to be.
Hmm. And that's usually 4 degrees is about 250 RPM as far as where the power band's going to be. Is usually what that's just the rule of thumb.
Okay, let's see if we can catch up. I'm sure we're behind. I did my soapbox for a little while.
Sure.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
no,
but
that's good. You're right on those, and also too lobe separation angle too. Now, as far as cranking compression, the tighter it is, the higher it's going to be. The wider it is, the lower it's going to be. It's another one also.
let's see. Michael Schmidt says, love this subject of fuel types is slow burn, hence higher octane for an undersquare long rod small bore engine to increase power on the bang stroke.
Won't
Nitro
make any
seems
difference.
it is useful in this situation.
It's only
Um,
going to burn in the first 20%. Doesn't matter what those 20% is. It's going to burn the first 20%. I have Slant sixes, and now I've run them on 87. The wife's car will run just fine on 87 because it's a lower compression. Mine's about 9 to 1. but it's got a really crappy head, so I have to run a higher fuel with 9-to-1 because it doesn't have a very good combustion chamber, so it's a very inefficient head. So I have to run that. But I've usually on the underscore or long rod bore type things. I've noticed it on rod to stroke ratios. That's where you're going to notice it. Shorter, so like a 1.48 rod to stroke ratio, they're less prone to detonation than say like one that's like say 1.6 and above, because it's how the piston is moving away from TDC.
It's where it is speedy at, right? Like
Yeah.
how fast away does it move? The longer the rod you got, the shorter the rod,
Faster.
At the top of the cylinder and the bottom of the cylinder is when it's moving the fastest, essentially.
Yeah, when it's coming away from the cylinder. Yeah, so it's moving fast, so it's less prone. So like on an undersquare engine, typically you're gonna have a long rod, so it's going to be moving slower away from TDC. So in that instance, yes, but typically if your compression ratio and cam is such, it wouldn't make much of a difference, is what I'm trying to get at.
All right. Let's see. Lout Burns says that my machinist said don't run any more than 24 on my 70 Boss 302. And that's because that Boss 302 has a really short stroke and a really short rod. So it doesn't need all that timing to make those cylinder heads work. Mohawk 62 says put the kids in the back seat, run to the store, get milk and bread, then stop at the station, put some gas in it, and then take it down the strip and drive it back home after dark. That's a street race car. That's what I always liked about wagons. Yes. Wagons were perfect for this kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mohawk, I can still do that in my Cookie Monster if I wanted to, for what you just said right there.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Let's see. JB's Little Shop says 10-to-1 is about fine for street is right. Anything over that is time for a race only engine.
Not unless you have aluminum cylinder heads. You can get away with a 10.5-to-1, and usually sometimes up to 11-to-1 if the cam is correct with say 93 to 91 octane. And usually because
it's even more forgiving if you have a big bore shorter stroke.
Yes, and because it dissipates the heat so fast from the cylinder head, just wicks it away, that you're not insulating that heat like he was talking about earlier. So it doesn't have that stored heat already. It's already been wicked away. Or cast iron, usually it's about a point difference for the same stored energy and wicking away. So typically 10.5 aluminum, 9.5 for cast iron.
That's where I think what Ford should have done is revisited the Cleveland after they figured out how to put compression back in the street engines. They should have revisited that Cleveland design because that's what made that thing magic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was the compression. Mm-hmm. That's what they were really designed for. So Bear Rose Garage says pulling timing is setting you back to 1974 and the dreaded horsepower drop of the 70s and 80s. If you were not like, I don't know where any of you guys were in like the 1980s and early 90s, all those cars were like littering everybody's freaking driveways, and you could buy them for like $200-300.
Yeah,
and they were so anemic. Oh my God, it was sad.
$500 race car. That's what we used to do. Yeah. You change the distributor, put a carburetor and headers on it, and got a race car.
All right. Well, so I guess I need to catch up because Bill McKyska just sent us a super chat here. Bill, thank you so much, man. Mild 318 in a work truck needs to be on and off road, but still need to be able to get up to speed on a freeway on ramp. I've been thinking about using an 800 CFM Q-Jet from a GM truck. Is there a better option that will get me the same mileage?
I don't know if I would go with an 800 CFM personally. This is just me on a 318.
Q-Jet, don't let it mislead you, Shane. That 800 CFM Q-Jet is like only 250 CFM primary, and then
I get it.
Yeah, it's capable of flowing 800, but it'll never do that.
No, I get that. No, I fully. I just never had good luck.
Is the only other thing that would be similar to like a Q-Jet.
Yes, yeah.
And then I don't know if they to me, they would be good, just as good on mileage a thermoquad would be. It might technically even be better because it has 2 metering rods for each individual float bowl, doesn't it? I think it's like a Carter AFB with just a square bore pattern.
Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for this, as far as what you're looking for, I would go with the camshaft that would be like, say, 215 to 212, duration of 50, no more than 215. I would be somewhere about 110, 112 lobe separation angle
Yeah, I
on
was just
that.
thinking 112 myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that way, because it's a small cam, so the 110 would definitely give it more grunt for the off road, but the 112 will definitely give you better mileage. So there's really no free lunch there, and that would definitely give you some mileage. I had a similar engine to that, but basically in the 360 world, and we would get about 17 miles of the gallon out of that thing when that engine was in the Cookie Monster, but it was red at the time, and it was our daily driver, and it ran just fine.
I think that would probably work really well. I believe that Quadrajet would probably work great in that application. That you're lucky in the sense of Quadrajets on a Mopar. It may seem weird to some people, but from like 1974 to like, say, it might have been later, 76 to maybe 89 or something. They all had Quadrajets on Mopar trucks, trucks and vans. If they had a 4-barrel carburetor, that's what they came with. But I think most of those were 360. I don't think 318 was a 4-barrel option a lot. It was like police car option stuff, right?
Yeah.
And was it a Quadrajet or were they thermoquad?
Thermoquads.
So I don't know if there's going to be a jet and metering rod combination from that was originally installed. If you can find something, some homework, do some homework on research on it. If there was a 318 truck option with a Quadrajet on it, then I would start there with the metering rods and jets that it had, and then and go from there. But I think you could probably get one to work really well.
For me, I would be either Carter AFB, or I would go, like, say, with an Edelbrock style, just because that's what I know. And I would go with like a 600 CFM personally. That's just how I would do it. I literally had that exact same setup before, and it worked just fine. I never had to. Once it was one of those, I took it out of the box. I literally set it on there, and it was one of those. I remember the set it and forget it space age oven. Remember that? On your desk, you set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Basically the same thing. I basically set it. I turned them out until the thing started stumbling, left to go, set the idle, and then I never touched it again. So
I just I think, I don't know, because he says on and off road. In the off road application, the Quadrajet's a really good carburetor because the float bowl is center hung. It's essentially in the center. And that's where the Carters start to suffer, because when you get them on an angle,
the big hill,
that it screws the floats all up, which screws up your fuel metering.
I put the off road.
Do they have a float for like off road or something?
Yeah, they have. It's a needle and seat. It's got a little spring in it. Remember, like on your motorcycles, you would have a needle and seat, and then it would have a little spring inside there, so that way the float could bounce and it wouldn't bend it. So literally, they have those, and it works good. And I was able to.
I've never seen one of those.
Yeah, the Ram Charger had one on it, and it worked really good going down the sand dunes. It wouldn't stall, believe it or not. Actually, really, what it was is going down the sand dunes. It would stall, and so I put that in it, and it was totally fine. It's actually an off-road needle and seat. That's the name of it.
Okay, well there you go, Bill. Do a Quadrajet, or Shane's telling you do an Edelbrock Carter AFB with they got a needle and seat with a spring on it to compensate for off-road application. So I think that Q-Jet's a great idea, and they're readily available for Mopars.
And John actually was just about to say my very next thing I was going to say, and I would change transmissions too. As I would go from it's funny. Me and John think so light on this. 904, or get, like, say, an A999 transmission, which has a low ratio first and second and a lockup converter. Or, like he says right here too, I was just about to get to that. Go with, like, say, a 46 RH, which is going to be an overdrive. So I have the low ratio first, second with an overdrive and a lockup converter. So yeah, that's to me is everything on that, because that, like he said, they're very inexpensive and they're super efficient transmissions and very tough for what they can handle and what they
It looks
are.
like Blue Grit Garage. But somebody named Anna fell off a horse and is in the hospital an hour and a half away. So,
Well,
hey, best of luck, man. I hate to hear that, and I pray that your family is well and safe. All right, Michael Roberts. Good evening, guys. On a 331 stroker small block forward with full length headers, with 3-inch collectors, with 3-inch collector extensions to a 2.5-inch system make a difference versus 2.5-inch extensions.
Versus using
out what he's saying here. I think he's saying that the collector extension is 3 inches,
and then next
then it goes down to a 2.5. Will make a difference versus 2.5-inch. Actually, I don't think either one of them would be much of a difference. I think you'd be better off with the 3-inch collector extension down to a 2.5, because you can cut the excess pipe off.
Yeah, it's a small engine. Literally, it's a 331. So, and you're not going, to like 8,000 RPM. So, it really wouldn't make much of a difference at that point.
Yeah, I don't think we'll hurt it all that much. And what I would do is, if you're concerned with it bottlenecking right there, well, you can't do much with it bottlenecking right there. Yeah, I think that's going to be fine, to be honest with you.
I would go with a 3.5 off the header and then neck it down. That would just be mine. So that way, if you go to the track, you can take them off, and then you have some sort of 18-inch extension or something
pipe that you hang on there. Yeah,
call it good.
All right, Twisted Mopar Garage says piston design, flame travel across certain pistons, spark plug angles, valve positioning, all plays a part. All about a combination and what you are trying to achieve and what you're building.
100%.
Yeah, all those things need to be taken into account.
Yeah, especially if you have, say, what do they call a pop-up piston or some sort of dome on it, because you got to get the flame up and over and then back down. So sometimes you got to lead in for that, and sometimes that will create a hot spot. So therefore, it'll be more prone to detonation because of that exact very thing.
Well, and here's something that's interesting, and you already know this, but I was to throw this out there for everybody else that may not know this. A pop-up piston is actually the most inefficient piston design.
Yeah,
because it doesn't allow the flame kernel to travel straight across and even.
Flat top.
Yeah, flat top is the ideal one. And then if you can make it work, is high compression, small chamber, big dish. That will make the most power because it unshrouds the valve, and not just the X and the Y planes, but it also does it in the Z plane. The problem is, generally when you get a big dish piston, and they're most everything has a chamber, unless you're running like a I don't know, like a Duramax diesel. They're the only ones I've ever seen that have no chamber. Generally, the diesels have no
nailheads.
Nailheads have a chamber.
Well, that's most of the chambers in the cylinder, basically, because
and 409 Chevrolet is that way too.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm sorry, not nail. I meant to say 409. Sorry, 409. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Yeah.
But you try to have that. What you want is a flat top or a little bit of a dish, and that's where it's the most ideal. And that's also what affects the biggest effect of the kernel traveling across the piston, and the efficiency of the burn itself. So, all right.
Oh, by the way, thank you. I'm going to go full John Wilburn here. Keeps the lights on. How about that? There you go.
Let's see. Levi's Backyard Performance. What's y'all's thoughts on a staging duel? Is it cool or is it stupid? Is it a waste of time? To me, it's no, yes.
I think
that's because you don't know what a staging duel I don't think is about.
Yeah, you get in the other guy's head. If you're comfortable with your game and your setup and your staging procedure, if you're just sitting up there waiting, sometimes you'll get in the other dude's head. And in fact, if someone double bulbs me, that's exactly what I do. Is I go up there. If they go up there and double bulb me, the starter will look at me and they'll see me. I go like this. I start packing my gloves, and I haven't even rolled into the top beam yet. I'll roll into the top beam. I'll stack my gloves again. I'll look over at him. He'll look over at me. I'll go into the double lane, and now he's out of his game. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
A staging duel is generally something that's done when the other driver, like say one driver knows, let's say that they know the other driver likes to be the last one in the lights.
Mhm.
Okay. And either they'll accidentally roll in and double bulb, and then the other guy will take advantage of it and make them wait, or you want to be the last one in, the other guy refuses to be the last one in. So that begins your staging duel. The same thing happened in NHRA Pro Stock in the 80s. I don't remember what the guy's name was, but he refused to go in last. And Bob Glidden was the champion of Pro Stock at the time, and he always staged last. But the other guy, I want to say, refused to stage last. So they just waited there. And they waited. And what happens is the temperatures get so high in the car because they got microscopic cooling systems and no pumps and all that stuff that they eventually just had to stage or the car wasn't going to run. And the sad part was, I think when the guy eventually when they did finally stage, because that was the first big staging duel that I'd really seen before. I've seen it a couple of times since then, and most of it has been on street class cars. So it's like you could sit there for a millennia and it would never burn down.
Mhm.
But I don't think the guy that waited that long for Bob to stage, I don't think he even had a good pass that run. The car got so hot it didn't even run worth the crap and all kinds of stuff. But
because you can put too much heat in the cylinder too.
yeah, but it is something that's for your 28-10-5 class. If you show up to run that this year, let's say your car runs a 590, okay, and I'll be honest with you, 590 is about a second too fast or too slow to cut it. So when you know that factor and you have a second to cover, you take every advantage that you can possibly have and throw it at the other driver, right? And that's what I was planning on doing this year. I knew I was outgunned. I mean, if I could show up and run a 590, 580, I was going to be covered by like a second by these guys. Some of them are claiming they've run down almost in their fours. So I don't have that kind of horsepower. I don't have that kind of steam. I don't have that kind of money. But you know what I do have? I'm going to go up there and use everything I have. I'm going to be first off the line, guaranteed. If I don't red light, it'll be amazing.
Yeah.
But
I won't have the fastest car either by a long shot, by half a second.
Yeah, I'm going to use every freaking. None of it's cheating. All of it's just making the stuff in your favor.
It's using the rules in your favor, basically, is what you're doing.
So, like if you change tires in between rounds on the front, if you went to a smaller diameter tire, you have less rollout. If you have less rollout, you can leave sooner, but you also have a staggeringly high chance of red lighting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you deep stage, you're going to have the slower ET, but you're covering less track.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got to think about which one of these works in your favors. This is where the staging duel comes into play. If you know the other driver likes to be in last, and he likes to be in last because it gives him all the time in the world to get inside of his own head, figure out how he wants to run the race. The first thing I need to do is roll the car in, make the light come on, put it where I want it, get on the trans brake, bring it up to this RPM, and then leave. And that's what he's wanting. That's what he's used to, is that standard routine. And he wants the routine to go his way. So here you are, you refuse to stage. You make him stage first. And when he stages first, what happens? He's waiting for you to stage, and now you've knocked him off of his game. He's not thinking about bringing the RPM up to 2,600, hand on the trans brake. It screws up his head. And then so what happens is, generally, the first thing that happens is they don't bring the RPMs up. The car will stumble and bog off the line if they hit the light. That's if they hit the light, because they're so out of the routine, they're not paying attention to what's actually happening, and they can't adjust to it. And that's what makes it good about that's what the staging duel purpose was for. That's the exact purpose of it, is to screw with the other guy when he's got you covered by a mile and you can't do nothing about it. But if you're a real racer, you won't walk away and say he's already beat me and just put the car on the trailer. You go up there and you give it your all, and that's your staging duel. That's your deep stage. That's getting rid of the two-step. There's a bunch of little things that you can do. That's airing down the tires. That's changing tires in between rounds on the front. If you've never seen a guys change tires on the front before, you've never seen real heads-up racers, because they'll do it in between rounds.
I actually have 2 sets of tires for that reason, 26 and 24s.
And see, like Shane knows, like, well, there's all kinds of little tricks that you should be doing, Dylan. Like, okay, when Shane and I raced in 2000, was it 16?
16, yeah.
Okay, I had 2 cans of fuel. I put 1 can in the car and I ran all day on it. The other can I put in my cooler with bags of ice.
But why did you do that?
Huh?
Because you came over and saw me.
No. I've always done that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but when it got to the second round and I got to put this dude away, I'm getting out the frozen can and dumping it in, because now it's got no heat in the fuel, right? And it's going to drop a couple hundredths there. Well, if I can get a couple hundredths off the line, a couple hundredths off the light, and a couple hundredths, on the car, making more horsepower, man, that couple hundredths adds up pretty fast to a tenth.
I actually have a fuel pump that hooks onto my fuel cell, and it pulls the fuel out.
That's what I saw you doing.
Yeah. And so I've got it goes through a cooler, and it's got copper line in it. And so it literally, the fuel that's in the tank, I just let it sit there and run, and it literally brings ice into that fuel cell. And then I leave my fuels in ice for that exact reason, because it's cool and it's dense for that exact reason. And it does make a big difference, because it does a cooling effect. I think was it no Hot Rod is a horsepower Engine Masters. They did a dyno test with cold fuel and hot fuel. Go and watch it and see how much difference it makes. It really makes a difference.
I'm sure it does. But all those little things add up. So that's what that's your staging duel is just part of that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's stupid. You just have to know the purpose and reasoning behind it.
Yeah. And it's fun too.
I like watching everybody else around, like, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm just catching up from
John Mulburn saying, I did the anti-staging duel with Professor P. Go right in and then leave on a sundial. When he drove Cope's truck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
he waited there forever. So mostly old parts. Ron Ward is here, and he says, if you're using nitrous or NA against a turbo car, make them stage first at all cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's your staging duel. Let's see. Michael Schmidt says, E85, doesn't this fuel cool intake stream and add oxygen, thereby automatically increasing horsepower? If so, why isn't everyone using it?
Availability.
Yeah, and actually Engine Masters did this test. They found out that E47 is the magic number. That's where you get all the benefits of the ethanol, and you still have all the power from the gasoline.
Yep, exactly. And that you can 15, what is it, like 15% more fuel, I think is what is the magic number also. And it really does work. It makes a huge difference.
That may be one thing I got to pull out of my magic hat.
What's that?
Put some E85 in my race fuel and go up to 47%.
I wish I could find it here that's consistent around where I'm at.
I'm just going to buy some. Here's one thing I know that's consistent. If I buy 85, it's going to have more ethanol in it than it will gasoline. That's something that's consistent.
Yes.
Then I can also around here buy just gasoline. So all I have to do is add some gas into it until
50-50. Yeah.
Until I'm at 47, 53 or 50-50.
50-50 will get you pretty damn close to it because
and it'd be easy to get. Yeah, you're right. 50-50 would be really easy to do with just all you need is one of them hydrometers, and
they're cheap now. You can get one so that's actually what I was looking at doing. That's why I made this. That's why I put the Dominator on it, was for this exact reason, is that if I can find a decent source for E85, I'll do it.
So Ron says NHRA Pro Stock Duel was Daryl Alderman versus Warren Johnson. Johnson went ballistic in the post-race interview.
I remember I was watching that race when that happened.
I don't remember what it was. I thought it was Glidden. But it
No,
could
it
have been
was.
Darrell Alderman and Warren Johnson. But
I didn't remember the names. I just remember the race, and I remember the starter, the guy, the big long time NHRA starter.
yeah,
He kept
Buster
looking
Couch,
at him,
he
and he
kept
kept
motioning him in. Like,
yeah, and he kept stomping his foot and everything. Man, it was he was getting all angry. Yeah, I remember that.
oh, let's see.
Lount Burns is saying that, well, my money's still on Mopar Joe. That's good. How much money are we talking about? 855.
What's that?
Yeah. So yeah, me and Joe do have a race. I did officially call him out. I know he wanted a piece of the Cookie Monster. So I was going to race him when I was at Newport, but I just held off, and I figured, you know what? Let's just make it for the No Name Nationals.
Yeah. Michael Schmidt says 50, 50, 85 in gas. What AFR do you tune it to? That's a good question.
12.2 to 12.5. Now you can actually run them if you're running straight 85. Man, you can be somewhere in the 10. But remember that there's a lambda scale too. This is going way beyond. But if you just have a regular scale, I would go like say 11 and a half if straight 85 or 10 and a half. But here's the thing: is that E85 is so forgiving. Your window of tune is so large. That's the reason why it's so much fun to use, and that's the reason why I want to use it. Is it works really well with nitrous for that exact very reason, because the tuning window is so large. With gasoline, the tuning window is much narrower. Timing is about the same, but the fuel tuning window is bigger.
So John Wilburn is thinking that it was Scott Jeffrey on and WJ with the staging duel. I don't know. I thought it was Glidden. But Ron Ward's saying that, oh, okay. He's saying that ethanol fuel. The issue with ethanol fuel is that it's actually hydroscopic. Hydro meaning water. It absorbs moisture which hinders performance. Just like a dragster that runs on alcohol. Same thing. They absorb water in the fuel.
Yeah.
And
so typically, if I'm going to run 85, I would just drain the fuel out, put regular gasoline in it, start the car, run everything with gasoline in it, and then only run the 85 when you're at the track.
And here's the other thing that you can do is that you can literally go dump just some 100% gasoline in it and then let it run, and it'll cycle it all out.
Yeah.
Just keep running this regular straight gasoline in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
man, it's almost been 2 hours already.
I know, dude. So what do you got to plug?
Just go see John Wilburn. Other than that, really nothing. I mean, I have a 5-second car. That's all I'm going to say. Not going to say anything more than that.
That's about all you need to say, I guess.
That's all I need to say. That could be $5.99. That could be $5, whatever. We don't know. All I'm saying is that it's a 5-second car, and that's the last update you get from the Cookie Monster. That's it. That's what you get.
Well, I don't have a 5-second car yet. I don't know if I will. We'll see how everything's playing out. But right now, all that stuff's going to be on the back burner so I can get this big D, and I don't mean Dallas, done.
Yeah.
So,
and like always, go see John Wilburn on Friday on his channel. And then I think he has one going on Sunday also at 5 p.m. I think is at Central Time for the No Name 500 contenders for like a workshop. So remember that. And then I'm pretty sure he has something on his channel does every Friday night. So go and check him out on John Wilburn, the bringer of the No Name Nationals, that guy.
All right. But other than that, we're pretty much out of here. This is another show in the books. So I appreciate y'all stopping by and the questions you threw out there. There was quite a few questions. So it looks like those two topics kind of sparked some conversation amongst the crew here.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you guys didn't mutiny me or Shane, because I hate mutinies, especially live.
And John Wilburn, before you leave, he actually posted a YouTube. It was Warren Johnson, right there. There you go. That was the 1994 Slick'em 50 Nationals.
Slick 50. We'll drain the Slant 6 and let her eat.
Man, I'm telling you, just
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah. Have a good week.